أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدة الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين ورحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وشفيع ذنوبنا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا مولانا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
ثم الصلاة والسلام على آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس ويطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وجبر
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا صدق الله العظيم. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وجبر.
My mothers, sisters, and daughters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today, inshallah, is our ninth lecture in the series, Lessons Holding On to Faith While the World Falls Apart, Lessons in Resilience and Resistance from Imam Hussain alayhi salam and Sayyada Zaynab alayhi salam. And we are truly blessed to have this opportunity. I really want to add to all the thank yous, the gratitude for your warm support. Everyone knows what I go through before I sit here. And honestly, it is the love, the warmth. I get so many messages, even with resources, things that people have read or heard that would help me. And they pass it on. So truly, I am really grateful. And as you know, these lectures are most of them already uploaded on Living the Quran YouTube channel. And they're also on the podcast, Living and Loving the Quran. And if you have any questions, any comments, feedback, please reach out at livingthequran786@gmail.com. So today's lecture is going to be a little bit different in the sense, I like to sometimes go off on tangents, give lots of stories, but today we have to talk about a very serious matter. Okay, so we have been discussing this verse from Surah Fussilat, verse 30, which says, "Inna lazina qalu rabbuna Allahu summa istaqamu." Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. That we're talking about those people who say Rabbuna Allahu, that our God is Allah. And then they do Istiqama. And throughout these lectures, we've been exploring what this word means. What is Istiqama? What is this posture of standing against deviation from ourselves, to remain on the straight path, to stand firm in the face of oppression. So to have this posture of resistance. And in order to do that, we said we need resilience. And we started talking about what inner resilience meant, how we can develop it in our day-to-day lives. And then we said that, when we have this posture of istiqamat, we are not on our own, right? Allah promises us that He will send malaika, in other words, unseen forces, to support us. And this will build a kind of inner strength, and we will be free from grief and fear, are the two things that Allah promises in this verse. And we explained what that meant was that our mission becomes so important, and today we'll see a lot more of that the fear and grief that we face on the path, which we will, Allah has actually promised, guaranteed that we will have moments of challenge, sometimes much longer than moments, right? So we will have no fear and no grief in this world, also as a result of our focus, right? As a result of our standing in this posture of Istiqamat. And then in the hereafter, he has promised, and the verse says that he has promised us Jannah, which means that we have everlasting facility. And we also said that, you know, when we think about our challenges in this world, it's really a good idea to keep them in perspective. That what is, you know, we said that you cannot understand challenge in this world and you cannot understand the purpose of it. And we talked a lot about that, that in order to kind of go through them, we have to understand the temporariness of this world compared to what we are promised. Right. And we've heard so many stories that when people, you know, have really firm faith in them, they're like, it's not a big deal. You know, if you have a shot, you know, the pain lasts a very short time, but you know that you're getting a boost of immunity, for example, right? If you're taking a vaccine. So we talked about that. Then we talked about the fact that, you know, this verse says that the first thing that these people who have this posture of istiqamat, what do? They say Rabbun Allah. And we talked about what are some of the distractions that lead us away from God in our lives today. And we spent quite a bit of time on that. And then we said, what are some ways that we can actually manage those distractions and build and nurture our relationship with God? Because again, as we will see today, and what we have been discussing throughout these series, is that it is this unshakable faith in God and His Word that can help us, that can help us have this posture of istiqamah to go through this life despite, you know, when the world is falling apart, for example. And we said that two very main ingredients of that relationship, of course, first to know Him, you know, then to build a relationship with Him. We talked about how we can use love languages, for example, to build our relationship. And the two things that we pointed out in great detail was the practice of khushu, which is to have awe of Allah. And we said that we can actually nurture that if it doesn't come naturally to us. There are some ways, you know, two main things we talked about was, you know, connecting to His Word, recognizing the glory in His Word, number one. And number two, recognizing the glory in His connection, in His creation, right, the universe. And we said these are two very important ways that we can nurture khushu in our hearts and in our lives. And then we said that after all this, we still need tawakkul. We need tawakkul because tawakkul means trust in Allah, trust in Allah's plan, trust in Allah's timing. Why do we need tawakkul, especially to have this posture of istiqamat? Is because things will not happen on our timeline. When we see the way the world is going and we see, you know, that it's actually sometimes we feel that instead of getting better, it's actually getting worse, right? And that's when we have to understand that our role is simply to take action, that we are not called to change anything. The Prophet ﷺ was not called to change anything. We all have a role to play. And as long as we are playing that role, that is what we term as success. That is what we term as having, as having done our bit. And in order to do that, we need to nurture this quality of tawakkul. Then we talked about what role do we have to talk about or to play in the injustices that we see in the world today. And we spent quite a bit of time on that. Then yesterday we talked about the idea of Amr bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar. In other words, this is, and throughout we've been saying, you know, our theme has been that our mission for mourning cannot be separate for Imam Hussein's mission for leading Medina. That our mission, when we commemorate him, when we come to this parish year after year, we have to remember what his mission was, and we have to renew our pledge to him. And one way of doing that, we said Amr bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar, which gets a very bad rap today. It's a very hard thing to do in today's environment. And yet we said it's like the moral conscience of the Ummah. And if we engage in these acts of enjoining good, forbidding evil, and we said that this has to be done in stages. The first part is that we enjoin good, and the second part is that we then, you know, once we've kind of established ways for truth to flourish, for goodness to flourish, only then can we stop evil. If we do that, the first step, people need to know what to do, what is encouraged rather than what is discouraged first. Okay. And then, so today, you know, we've laid the foundation, and now what is missing is an embodied example of what we're talking about. So today, inshallah, we are going to be talking about Sayyada Zaynab alayhi salam and how she is the embodiment of Istiqama, of tawakkul, of resilience, of resistance, and how she is the perfect role model to guide us, in our world today. That we don't need to borrow courage from other places. That we are actually, this is our heritage. This is what we have inherited. And in order, first of all, can we have a salawat? So as we look at her words today, and today, I really want to actually take some time and look at just moments of what she said, because every word that she says is so powerful that it has a lesson to teach us today, okay? It's actually, her khutbahs, if you could call them a master class in calling out tyranny. If you wanted to study how to stand up to injustice, I invite you to study the khutbahs of Sayyada Zaynab alayhi salam. So we'll talk about, and I like to think of her and as of her mother, Sayyada Fatima alayhi salam, and her grandmother, Sayyada Khadija alayhi salam, as the original disruptors. They're the original, so today when we are talking about people who kind of disrupt the system and who are standing up, we've heard this, right? That in a patriarchal society, women like that are called trouble, right? We all heard that. And these are the women who kind of disrupt the system and make everyone uncomfortable. And this is the heritage of these three women. They were the original disruptors, right? When we see Sayyada Khadija, who was she? She was a businesswoman in a patriarchal society who married, if you look at it from if you were reading history, just facts, she married someone younger than her and someone beneath her social status, right? If you look at it. Then she disrupted the whole economic system by actually giving away everything that she had in the service of Islam, right? So then we see Sayyada Fatima alayhi salam. Wow, what a disruptor. Okay, so we know that after the Prophet died, we've kind of alluded to this, that Imam Ali alayhi salam, began a period of silence. And it was Sayyada Fatima alayhi salam who went door to door. So she was the original grassroots movement. She went door to door. She kind of told people what was happening. She held them accountable. Shariati, again, I keep mentioning this beautiful book that he wrote. He calls it, when he's narrating this idea of her on that horse in the middle of the night in Medina, he calls her the beloved, rebellious daughter of the Prophet. Okay? And he says that her house, Fatima's house, becomes the center of rebellion. So, this is what she did. She held people accountable. Her khutbah in Fadak, right? She walks into the powers that be, walks into them and refuses to hear any lies. Just goes one after the other, telling them what had happened and what the truth that they could not bury, right? And we know that the Muslim world till today doesn't know what to do with the words. How can they reconcile what happened with what Fatima, the beloved daughter of the Prophet, who, the Prophet introduced her saying, he who hurts Fatima has hurt me, and he who has hurt me has hurt Fatima. This is in our history, and how do we reconcile that with what happened, right? So hypocrisy was very much alive then and now. So let's see, first of all, what the Quran talks about with people like Zainab. So Zainab, we know, inherited all of this, right? She inherited her eloquence, her rebelliousness, if you want to call it that, from her mother. She inherited her courage and her eloquence. When you look at her khutbahs, people compare them to Imam Ali's words in Nahj al-Balagha. And we know that Imam Ali's words in Nahj al-Balagha are like the standard. It's called Nahj al-Balagha, right? The peak of eloquence. And here is this woman in, 7th century Arabia who is speaking like the most erudite person around, okay? So the Quran in verse 146 of Al Imran says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and how many a prophet has fought with whom were many worshippers of the Lord. So they did not become weak-hearted on account of what befell them in Allah's way, nor did they weaken, nor did they abase themselves, and Wallahu yuhibbus sabirin. So what is this? This verse is talking about what the Quran calls Ribbiyun, the devout ones who stood firm with the prophets. And what do they say, first of all? That they displayed their faith. In other words, they were very clear on where they stood. Okay, number one. And now we look at Zainab in that light. Okay, number one. Number two, they did not become weak-hearted. When you look at the courage of this woman, after everything that she has been through, we know it is not an ordinary kind of courage. Okay? And did not weaken and did not abase themselves. And really, when we look at that words, we will come to what we're talking about. So we said that Zainab alayhi salam, she did not rise in a vacuum. She stands on the shoulders of women disruptors, right? Because here's the thing, it's when we think of our women in Islam, right? We begin and we end with hijab. That's literally all we talk about, right? And we paint them as this mazloom characters who went through so much trauma and tragedy. And here's the thing, all of that is true. It is not that it is not true, but we have to look beyond that. We have to become mature, because otherwise we are not living in that, right? We are not subject to the kind of zulm that Zainab had. So how do we learn from her? Then she becomes this distant character who we cannot relate to. But when we call her a disruptor in the face of resistance, can you relate to that? Can you relate to someone who stands up and speaks her mind regardless of what anyone does to her? So we have to find ways of connecting to these women. Otherwise, we are doing a disservice. We are actually doing a disservice to their memory. So, and that's why we call her the lioness of Karbala. The lioness of Karbala. And every word that she spoke was like a roar. It literally was, because she walked into the court and imagine, when as I'm reading her words, I really want you to use your imagination to picture this court full of Arab men with hatred, disdain, right? Thinking that they can crush the Ahlul Bayt. This was what she walked into. We cannot minimize that, okay? So her first, and we're talking about lessons in resilience, right? So we're going to do this in two parts. First is her resilience just through her presence in who she was and her actions. And then, we'll take her words and then take lessons from her. So the first lesson we learn is that the courtroom became her battlefield. That, after Yazid had martyred everyone in, all the men except for Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam on the battlefield of Ashura, he thought he was done. Then he said, okay, I'm going to humiliate these women further, right? The family of the Prophet. What he didn't count on was this. Zainab was the daughter of Ali. She was not someone easily humiliated or intimidated. They forgot that her mother Fatima alayhi salam had once walked into the Prophet's mosque to challenge power publicly. And Zainab had inherited that courage. So unveiled and unbowed, Zainab stood in a courtroom meant to break her. But what did her presence do? It broke the court instead. In a society that discouraged women's public voice, just her presence was revolutionary, right? The fact that she had the guts to speak. And so scholars tell us that she turned Damascus into another Karbala with her words. She turned Damascus into another Karbala with her words. She was the feminine face of Hussain and Abbas. Right? So So she may have been shackled, but what her presence shows us is that inner freedom is not something that anyone can take from us. And how can we live this today? Some of us are in very challenging situations, right? We may be living in abusive households, in abusive relationships, and we kind of take that on. We take that on, and it impacts our self-esteem when people tell us off, when they criticize us. And we have to turn to Zainab. Nobody could take that inner freedom from her. You can stand tall, because remember, we talked a lot about this, right? That our inner strength does not come from human beings. It comes because Allah tells us in the Quran that He has honored the sons of Adam, right? And the daughters, obviously. And that He has created us the best of makes. So this is the kind of inner freedom, and freedom, that's how else would you call it, right? So the fact that she may have been a prisoner outwardly did not shake her. Second lesson, right? Resistance as mourning with purpose. And this is what we've been saying throughout, that this Farsh of Azar is a revolution. It's a space for a revolution. First, it begins by revolutioning our insides every single year. We spend 2.5 months listening to self-growth lecture after self-growth lecture after self-growth lecture, right? And I keep saying this, I know of no other community on the planet that takes the time and attention to do this on a yearly basis, okay? So we bear witness, right? We bear witness to what happened, just like Zainab bore witness to what had happened. She founded what we now call the University of Karbala. Right? We've all heard this, that this Farsh, the memory of Karbala is a university. It has no age limits. It's free for everyone to attend. And what is the curriculum? If you ever thought about that, everyone tells you it's a university. What are you going to get a degree in? Okay. Resistance, right? Resistance 101 and self-growth 201. That is what is being offered at this university, right? So when we attend, we have to ask every year, how many courses did we pass? How is this what we are learning? How is this showing up in our lives, right? So Mona Bilgrami, in a beautiful book, right, The Victory of Truth, some of you may have read it, she says that the message of Karbala reached us not only because of the blood of Hussain, but because of the struggle of Zainab to ensure that it did, right? So her first majlis, right, this university that she founded, was a profound act of reclaiming the narrative. What had Yazid and Ibn Ziyad, what had they been telling the people? They had been saying that these are rebels. And he did not count on the fact that these people who were like, we have to look back to what happened on the day of Ashura. Every year I think this to myself, right? The days of Azar, like I'm thinking, okay, 9th day, I am exhausted, I'm tired, right? And then you think back to Zainab, what kind of resilience does this woman have? Not only is she living it, she is, so she becomes the leadership in crisis. Remember, everyone is gone. The only person who is left from the leadership of the Ummah is Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. And so he himself is unwell with the great wisdom of Allah. So not only does she have to shepherd the women and children, provide them the emotional strength and consolation, because remember, each of them had lost the dearest things to their heart. She has to confront the tyrants in Kufa and Sham, and she has to keep Imamat alive. This is the model of resilience that we have in front of us. And she does this while holding her own significant pains. Remember we were talking about the fact that when you have a big mission, then your personal pain becomes kind of to the side. And this is what Bibi Zainab alayhi salam teaches us. That she had so many people to grieve, so many, from her beloved brother to Abbas to Akbar to her own sons. But we know, to her own sons, she knew that the purpose of mourning, Hussain, the purpose of mourning Abbas was much greater. It was to reclaim the narrative of what people were saying. It was to teach them what exactly happened, who these people were. For her own pain, she waits. She waits until the message is delivered and her job is done. Okay. So now let's look at parts of her sermons and see exactly what she tells us. So the first lesson from her sermons is, and we know that she did two very famous sermons, at least two, right? One in the court of Ibn Ziyad in Kufa, and the next one in the court of Yazid in Sham. Okay. So the first thing that she teaches us is again this idea of Rabbun Allah, anchoring her resistance, her resilience in unshakable faith in God. So she opens her sermon in Yazid's court with the glorification of Allah. She says, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the universe, and blessings be upon my grandfather, the chief of God's messengers. She is reminding everyone who she is, and then she quotes the Quran. Then evil was the end of those who did evil because they rejected the communications of Allah and used to mock them. So she reminds people that what you see of victory is not victory. No matter what you have today, an evil end awaits you. Right? So she refused to let her own grief distort the truth, refused to let the chains silence her. So what lesson can this teach us today? That in order to have this resilience, in order to have this posture of resistance, the first thing we need to do is work on our relationship with the Lord. When you look at every single person who died on the plains of Ashura and every single person who was left, this is what they had in common. That their faith was unshakable. And when your faith is unshakable, when you are tied to the Lord of the universe, then who can defeat you, right? So strengthen that and then show up in public with pride. Show up in public with pride. Whatever, and I'm not going to go into this, right? Whatever our own views may be about hijab, for example, we cannot doubt, we cannot deny that it is a very public form of resistance. It's a very kind of, that's it, right? It's a public form of resistance to show people, I don't dance to your drums. Like I'm only answerable to God. Okay. The second thing we learn from her khutbahs, right? Reminders of the evils committed. Again, this is so relevant to us because history, we said, we keep hearing this, that history belongs to the victors, right? That history is written by the victors. Zainab has assured that will never, ever, ever happen, okay? So in Yazid's court in Damascus, she cries out, do you dare to strike Hussein's mouth with your cane? Indeed, why wouldn't you? You have already wounded the Prophet's heart, spilled the blood of his family, and torn the root of his household. You've done what would tear the skies, crack the earth, and bring down the mountains. She reminds everyone the magnitude of what they have done. In Kufa, we know that as people started finding out what had happened, they started crying, they started weeping, they were very remorseful. But Zainab would not let them get away with it. She said basically that you're crying crocodile tears. It's too late and too little. Do you know which part of the messenger of Allah you have cut? She says, whose blood you have shed? whose sanctity you have violated. Every single thing she spoke was an indictment. It was an indictment in the court. You know, everyone thought that they were holding her accountable, that she was brought as a prisoner. And here she is with her words, every single one of them cut deeper than a sword. So she kept naming what was wrong and would not allow the tyrants to forget it. So what lesson can we take away today from this, right? So coming back to what I call digital jihad. Okay? Many of you say, like, have noticed that, I keep dissing social media and all of that. But here's where it becomes really important. In today's age, we know that media is sold. The Western media cannot be trusted to remember or to tell the truth or to bear witness. It cannot be trusted to do that. And then, so where do we turn? We turn to, sorry? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yes. So absolutely support organizations that are keeping the word alive, right? Organizations that are doing a good job, absolutely. And the fact that not everyone is on Zateo, I can guarantee you that people that we are arguing against are not on Zateo, right? So where do we go? Which is the battlefield? The battlefield is Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. It is. So just scrolling by is not enough, my friends. We tell ourselves, I'll get into trouble. We tell ourselves, I have such a small audience. Remember the lizard who spat on the fire of Namrud. You are not being asked to change anything. Literally, you're only being asked to bear witness and to register your dissent. That is our role. So truth telling, we know, is a form of jihad. So we need to use our platforms and we need to speak up in our communities, even though it may be very, very uncomfortable, right? Number 3, some lessons we can learn from her. And by the way, for those of you who want to, look at these things again and kind of digest them, because it is a lot, I realize that, I will put it up as a blog, inshallah, in a few days. So you can come back to it. Number 3, naming hypocrisy and unmasking tyranny. So sometimes we know resistance is about unmasking the face. We know today, if nothing else, what the genocide has done is unveiled a lot of things, right? I don't know about you, but I know many of us are no longer enamored by the West. We are no longer impressed by these, what we thought were bastions of academia that some of us spent a whole inheritance sending our children to, right? We are no longer impressed by them because we know at the end of it, they're liars and hypocrites, right? And so in Yazid's court, she says, there is nothing surprising in your actions. So some of us, I know I was very surprised by what was happening in academia, right? In Yazid's court, Zainab says, there is nothing surprising in your actions. How can one expect decency from a child of a woman who chewed the liver of the righteous? She will not let people forget what happened to Hamza, right, who was the original Sayyada Shuhada. She will not forget that Hind chewed the liver of this man. That is the level of barbarism that these people were capable of. One whose flesh grew on the blood of martyrs, one who looks at us with rancor and hatred and does not delay in showing their hatred. So how is this relevant today? Many people will argue that the world began on October 3 or 7 or whatever, 7th, October 7th, right? And it is our job. This is what Zainab did. She reminded people that the world did not start, the oppression did not start with Karbala. right? And this is what we have to remind. This is the lesson we learned from her resilience, that we have to keep people's memories alive. So we need to expose global standards. And guys, I know, like I've said this in the first lecture, I'd rather talk about Zen than Zionism. I'd rather talk about poetry than politics, right? This is tiring. And inshallah, in the lectures that come, they won't be here, but I will upload them on the thing. I'll talk about self-care and how we can, keep hope alive and look after ourselves as we do this, because standing up to resistance is not a sprint. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? It's not going to be accomplished in our lifetime. And given where the world is today, this is what the world is asking of us. So she named Yazid's crime, unmasked the history of Banu Umayyah's animosity, right? So we need to keep people's memory alive. That is what we learn. And again, what is the playing field is digital media, right? Our social media. Number 4, courage in the face of tyranny. So, resistance in a sense, it means a truth spoken so clearly that it shatters illusions. And so Sayyada Zaynab, standing in chains before Yazid in Damascus, did not plead. She did not justify. She did not, she didn't do any of that, right? What she did, she warned Yazid, do you think, O Yazid, that now you have seized control of the earth, that Allah has honored you and humiliated us? She reminds him what is true victory. Right? You look around proudly thinking the world belongs to you, but hold on and slow down. Have you forgotten the words of Allah? We only grant them respite so that they may increase in sin, and then they shall have a disgraceful punishment. She's quoting chapter 3, Surah Al-Imran, verse 178. And she continues, plan your strategy, strive to do your maximum. In other words, she say, kar lo jo karna hai. What can you do to us? What can you do to someone who doesn't fear death? What can you do to someone who you cannot humiliate, right? She says, plan your strategy, strive to your maximum, but by Allah, you will never erase our memory, nor destroy our revelation, right? Your days are numbered, and the curse of Allah is on the oppressors. So she reminds them that power built on injustice is temporary, that they can taste, they can convince themselves, they're not going to convince her. You will soon stand before God, she says, and you will wish you had been blind and mute, so you could not have done what you did. You will be brought to account before the Messenger of Allah. And so she says that you will never ever erase our memory. In other words, that you may win in this temporary plane while you're alive and while I'm alive. You may think that you are victorious, but victory will be ours. And this is what وَعَاقِبَةٌ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, right? This is what God promises us in the Quran. So what can we learn from this? How is this going to help us today, right? We can borrow courage. This is what I do, by the way. Before I open my mouth, I call on Sayyada Zaynab. I borrow her courage because I know that she has so much of it, right? That we can borrow a little bit of it. We can learn to speak clearly and respectfully in places that matter. And here's the thing. We need to remind ourselves that courage will not come before action. That we will need to do this while we are still scared and unsure. So we need to plan for sure. We need to, plan strategy. We need to do it with wisdom, but we cannot wait for courage because that's not going to happen, right? We know this, right? When we first started driving, we did not have the confidence. How did we get the confidence? Is through driving. And some people wait. They said, when I am confident, I will drive. And as we know, that doesn't work, right? So number 6, hope in ultimate victory. right? She planted flags that could not be uprooted. So after all that she endured, Zainab still carries hope in her heart, born of her unshakable trust in God, right? So to Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, she says, in this land, a flag will be raised over the tomb of your father, Imam Hussain, a flag that will never fade, that will never grow old, and no matter how hard the disbelievers try to erase it, it will only grow in greatness. And so she believed in a future that she could not see. She believed in a future that people in the court could not see, right? And so we see today, as a result of her words, that millions of people walk towards Karbala. And we see it growing, like her words are actually coming true year by year, right? We see that the numbers are only growing, they do not become, smaller. So what can we learn from her today? We need to practice hope. I always say that, a lot of things we talk about, they're not projects, they're practices, right? That we need to keep doing the same thing again and again and again to have it kind of settle in ourselves, in our hearts. So we cannot fall into despair. That is not a luxury we have. We cannot say that it's no point. Of course, all of us have days when we're like, I cannot do this anymore. It's too hard. What difference is it making, right? And the more actually we see the injustice on our social media platforms, the more kind of discouraged and despair we feel, right? So inshallah, we'll talk about, how to manage that and how to really take care of ourselves so that we can do this marathon. But we have to remind ourselves that despair, not an option, right? We need to look for things that are changing. And make no mistake, after 9/11, like we thought the world had come to an end for Muslims, right? Because we were under so much oppression and, anti-Muslim hate. And by the way, please don't call it Islamophobia anymore. The correct term is anti-Muslim hate, right? Islam is not something you should have a phobia about. Okay. And words matter. Words matter. This is what Zainab teaches us all the time. Okay. So we can learn to nurture hope. We need to celebrate what is changing. And like I said, that it may not happen in our lifetime, but the end of the empire has begun. We refuse to go numb because this is what happens. And by the way, consuming too much graphic imagery, it does make us numb. Why? Because our body is planned by Allah. It is created by Allah to protect us. So when we see so much, the reaction is shut down. Why? In order to protect ourselves. Right? So when I'm talking about resistance, when I'm talking about sharing, when I'm talking about unmasking hypocrisy, about speaking truth to power, none of these things need graphic imagery. They don't. Some people need that in order to kind of shake them out of their thing, right? Inshallah, we are not at that stage. And like I said, actually sharing images of people that have been martyred, that have been massacred, I don't know if that, I would want that for myself, right? Because it is a kind of disrespect to those people, to reduce them to a picture on our Instagram feed that we just scroll over. Why do we scroll over? Because we're protecting ourselves. There's a very good reason for that, right? But when you see pictures of children who were alive yesterday and are not today, that's how we nurture compassion, right? That's how we keep our hearts alive. Because friends, we cannot do this work without, sometimes, resistance, activism, is a very tough job and it can harden us. But the message we get from Imam Hussain alayhi salam is what? That he was crying out of compassion for his enemies on his last day. So we need to really nurture this love in our hearts. So Wizard Bizan, everyone follows her? Okay. So she said recently, and I always pray for her safety. And I know if she doesn't show up on my feed for a few days, I'm kind of worried, right? Because of what's happening. So she says, I'm confident. Look at this young woman, really young woman who had a perfectly normal life till all this started. I'm confident that this genocide will stop. The end of it has begun. Yes, it has begun with the burning of our bodies, homes, and memories, but it has begun. But friends, we can act to keep those memories alive. We see that all the time, right? And this is what Zainab has taught us, that a very important part of resistance is to keep memories alive. Because as we know, insan is called the forgetful animal, right? We all have really short memories. And if we don't, and this is why this is just like the more you look into the blessing of this farsh, the blessing of this farsh will not let us forget. It will not let us forget what happened 1400 years ago. And it will not stop teaching us lessons again and again, every year fresh, right? So this is the legacy we inherit. Zainab's resistance was about truth, dignity, and divine justice. She led with faith, she taught in chains, she protected the legacy of her brother so powerfully that centuries later we are still gathered in her name. This is our heritage. We don't have to borrow strength from others. At this time in our lives, we're very kind of disillusioned and discouraged. We're discouraged that can there ever be somebody standing up for truth, because all we see is fraud, right? All we see is that people who are unjust are winning, right? And so we have to borrow our strength from them. We inherited from our original female disruptors in our traditions, Khadija, Fatima, and Zainab alayhim salam. May we be able to channel their energies and their resistance as we mourn the tragedy of Karbala. So today, friends, we are here to remember somebody who was very, very beloved to Zainab alayhi salam, and that was Ali Akbar. So the day of Ashura dawns on the plains of Karbala. It is almost Fajr time. Hussain calls out to the apple of his eye, Ali Akbar, my son, please call out the adhan for prayers. I'm yearning to hear the voice of my grandfather. Hussain is so proud of Ali Akbar, and why would he not be? Ali Akbar is a fine young man, strong, healthy, and with such fine morality. There is another reason why Hussain loves Ali Akbar so much. He is a copy of Hussein's grandfather, Muhammad, the messenger of Allah. When any of the Ahlul Bayt particularly missed the Prophet, they would come to see Ali Akbar to do his ziyarah, since he reminds them so much of the Prophet. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ali Akbar's adhan echoes through the plains of Karbala. It reaches the enemy. They too are waking up for Fajr. They too will pray the same salah that Imam Hussein's camp is praying. They too will bear witness that Allah is the greatest. Their tongues will bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And then they will take out their swords to slay the grandson of the messenger that they claim to follow. Hayya al-salah, hayya al-falah, hayya al-khair al-amal. Hussain begins to cry as he listens to the word that his grandfather taught his ummah. How little they have learned. Hussain is sad because these people are not hurrying to success. They utter the Shahada, but they do not follow Allah or His Messenger. The Prophet told them that in order to recompense me for bringing you the faith, you must love my family. The Prophet has taught them, Hussain is from me and I am from Hussain. He also said, he who hurts my daughter Fatima hurts me. And now they are praying the Salat and then they're going to slaughter the family of Zahra. Fatima is hurt, the messenger is hurt. Because of the hatred towards Hussain, they are heading towards the eternal displeasure of the merciful Lord. La ilaha illallah. The ladies in the tents begin to weep as Ali Akbar finishes the call to prayer. They know this is the last time they will get to hear the beautiful voice of the son of Hussain. The Battle of Karbala begins around Zuhr time. The companions go one by one to lay down their lives for Hussain. When there are no more companions left to fight the enemy, it is the turn of the family of Banu Hashim. Ali Akbar, the darling teenage son of Hussain, comes to his father. May I have permission to go for jihad? Allahu Akbar. A teenage son coming to his father for permission to die. How does a father give this kind of permission? But Hussain is also a leader and the Imam. Personal affections cannot stand in the way of what is best for the Ummah. He must do what it takes to save the religion of his grandfather. Ali Akbar is a young man and must fight like everyone else. The decision is clear, but it is so very difficult. Ali Akbar is the one shaheed that the Imam does not dissuade from going into the battlefield. His son, Ali Akbar, will be the sacrifice that he will offer personally to save the faith. My son, Ali Akbar, go, you have my permission. But your aunt Zainab must give her permission too. Go and take her leave. Be patient with the women as they cry and lament. They all love you a lot. This will be hard for them. Ali Akbar goes to Zainab to take her leave. When he sees the sorrow on her face, he appeals to her love for Fatima and Hussain. Pupi Zainab, Ali Akbar says, whose life is more important, your Ali Akbar's or Zahra's son Hussain? My son Ali Akbar, I would sacrifice 1,000 lives to save Hussein's life. You have my permission. May Allah be with you, my son. As Ali Akbar runs into battle, Hussain calls out, "Oh Allah, be a witness against these people. For now, I have sent them a son of mine that most resembles to your messenger in looks, in character, and in speech. Oh Allah, he is the one at whom we look at whenever we desire the sight of your messenger." Akbar can sense that the ladies of the household are standing at the door of the tent watching him. He can sense that Zainab cannot take her eyes off him. He tries not to look back. He does not want to make this harder for them than it already is. But now Akbar can hear footsteps following him. He stops and looks back. Hussain is following him on foot. "Oh Baba, where are you going? Please Baba, go back to the tent. You gave me permission to go." "Carry on, Ali Akbar, I am not stopping you. It's just that I want to see you as long as I can. I will stop here, Akbar, ya Abati, but promise me that you will keep looking back after every few steps. Akbar, my darling, your old father wants to see you for as long as he can." This is the voice of a father whose chest is cracking open with every step that his son takes. Ali Akbar continues on. He looks back at Hussain as he has requested. He tries to erase the sight of his broken-hearted father from his mind and focus on the task ahead. He reaches the battlefield, fights bravely, and kills many well-known warriors. The sight of his father following him does not leave Akbar. It seems that Akbar is also looking for a way to get another visitation with Abu Abdullah. He comes back to Hussein's camp. "Oh Baba, the thirst is killing me, and the weight of this coat of mail is exhausting me." Imam's heart is both joyful and sad. Joyful that he gets to look at his son once more while he is still alive. He is saddened not to fulfill his son's wish. "Have patience, O love of my heart. Soon the messenger will give you a drink from the fountain of Kauthar." Ali Akbar returns to the battlefield. Umar ibn Saad issues the command to kill the sons of Hussain. Soldiers surround him, and one creeps up and thrusts a spear into Ali Akbar's chest. He falls from the horse and cries out, "Oh father, accept my last salam to you." Ali Akbar does not call his father for help. He does not want his father to see him in this state, but Hussain rushes to the battlefield. "Ali, Ali, my Ali, where are you?" The army forces are wondering if Hussain is calling his son Ali or his father Ali for help. Hussain sees Ali Akbar. His son is lying on the sands of Karbala with both his hands on his chest. Ali Akbar is taking his last breaths. He places Ali Akbar's head on his lap. My son, my darling, why are you covering your chest, my son? Is your chest hurting? Let me look at it. No, Baba, no, don't move my hands from my chest. You will not be able to bear it, Babu. Hussain gently moves Ali Akbar's hands. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Hussain cannot bear to see the spear in Ali Akbar's chest. He looks towards Najaf and he calls out, Baba, oh father, you lifted Khaybar, but it is harder to take the spear out from my son's chest. Ya Ali, adrikni. Fasayal man lazina zalamu ayyam al-khalibi yanqalibun. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ya Allah, accept this small offering of love from us. Ya Allah, in the name of the son of Hussain, protect our sons and our daughters. Ya Allah, may faith and guidance prevail in their lives. Make it easy for them to stay on your path. Ya Allah, we pray for the Ummah, for the lovers of your Ahlul Bayt who are suffering in so many parts of the world. They are being killed for the love and grief they show for the grandson of your most beloved messenger. Ya Allah, keep them safe and change the hatred in the hearts to love for Hussain. Let our community unite in the name of Hussain and his cause for justice. हमें एक उम्मत बना ए अल्लाह और हुसैनी रास्ते पे इस्तिकामत अता फरमा. Oh Allah, unite our hearts as a ummah and give us the strength to carry the banner of Hussain in our own lives. Ameen ya Rabbal Alamin. Matam Hussain.
Hussein, 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 Hussein.